Hi everybody, the date of this recording is Saturday the 9th of June, year 2022, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to get another installment on my backstory a little bit more. And what I will forewarn on, in terms of content warning and trigger warning, I will be discussing dysphoria a little in depth here. There will be some references to ostracizing, some maybe to bullying, and then possibly, depending on this, there might be possible reference to early suicidal ideation. So anybody who's tuning in, just be aware that they might hear some of this. But where I left off last time was with kind of what my earliest cognizance of my own gender identity was, and I don't want to necessarily skim over a lot of details, but I have to kind of accept my own limitations on what I'm able to revisit without putting myself into a bad state. So I appreciate everybody's understanding on that. But kind of what I wanted to make mention of was what happened, or what started happening, when I began interacting more with other younger kids my age. And we're talking about really kind of starting when I started kindergarten, which was that was 1979 into 1980, and at that time everything was just through a heteronormative lens, and there was no language to, and definitely, where I was going to school at the time, which was on a military base, there was just no support system at all. That it just didn't exist. But in terms of where I felt naturally inclined to be and what felt comfortable to me, it was with the other girls at the time. And in some certain social settings that necessarily wasn't an issue. When it came to things that was kind of organized by some of the supervising adults at the time, it was, boys had to be here, girls had to be here, and I was, of course, put in with the other boys, and it was hard. I was uncomfortable with that. I was very, very uncomfortable going to boys' washroom at the time. And unfortunately, when somebody is uncomfortable, other individuals in the room, that kind of vibe you get off will resonate, and it may be an easy target for bullying, I remember. And so I didn't feel really comfortable interacting with a lot of the kids at the time. And the problem was that when, in some situations too, where there'd be something where the other girls were engaging in, where I felt like I wanted to be a part of that too, because I wasn't viewed as being female, and obviously the situation was what it was, but I would be kind of ostracized in that way too. So it was really lonely, and it was when I would find myself kind of in a really despaired state, crying a lot, and I can't fault my parents for not understanding, because we just didn't have the language to really communicate that, what really was the root problem at that time. But what I found was that the only way I felt like I could be able to cope with being in that situation was kind of and trying to force myself to assimilate into and kind of hide myself a little bit more, and kind of effectively truthfully pretend to be something I'm not. And that kind of set the course for a lot of dysfunction later in life. As a matter of fact, my first real suicidal ideation, I was 8 years old at the time, I remember. And I remember just, it was, everybody was asleep, and it was probably about midnight, maybe 1 a.m., and I went out, and at this time where we were living on, it was a 2-story home. It was base housing, and it was effectively like a row home. And I remember going out there and actually getting out on the window ledge and kind of looking down and maybe seeing if I could throw myself off. That would be it. I hated myself. At that early of an age, I didn't like myself. And one thing I've mentioned on, well, mostly on my Facebook thread, but I'll mention it here too, is that when you love yourself, loving others becomes very easily. Tragically, the same thing applies with hatred. When you hate yourselves, becoming antisocial, becoming a misanthrope, that comes very easily too. And that unfortunately happened to me, and through my adolescence and part of my early adulthood. I became more immersed in that darkness, and I'll talk about that more on a future installment. But in terms of having to hide, that was where it started. That was at that early of an age. And I don't know if we really give a lot of young kids enough credit for what they're really cognizant of, what they're aware of, and how they navigate through things. Kids are a lot more savvy than we give them credit for. And I definitely knew after a while it wasn't safe for me to be who and what I am, even at that age. I'm glad I am now. And I don't hate myself now. I like myself. I love myself. But I will talk about that a bit more. But I will stop here with this. And if it does help others to watch this and to listen to my story, I'm glad. And thank you for taking the time to listen. So anyway, I'll stop here, and got those things I gotta do before the night's over. So hope all of you are doing well, and we'll talk again soon. Alright, love you. Take care.